So I might just kick it off, Ken. So property in Australia accounts for 13% of GDP, $202.9 billion. It's Australia's biggest employer, and it's currently being hit with an event or a black swan that nobody could see really coming. What are some of the impacts of COVID-19 on the property industry, and how are we doing so far?
Yeah, it's certainly a big event right across the economy. And while there are some sectors of the economy that got hit very hard early, tourism and travel, for example, property is certainly not immune. And there's different components to the industry, obviously. We've got the commercial property owners and that commercial property assets. And obviously you've got distressed tenancies within there. That's particularly in shopping centres, but it's also across retail and actually industrial as well. So that affects materially affects the commerciality of those enterprises. We've also got from a development point of view, I think the country and the sector's done a very good job in continuing existing construction sites, but we've got a huge hit to demand here. Particularly around residential. Our population in Australia is going to drop for the first time in since the First World War and the Spanish influenza. So that will be a quite a significant drop in demand. So the level of projects, the level of construction activity, which will occur beyond the existing construction projects, could well be a lot weaker, and that's a big watch out for governments.
Mm. And do you see this as a short-term blip, and then we'll just get moving on, after say 6 months or so, or something? It's going to be a little bit more longer in terms of how it's drawn out.
Oh, look, the impacts of this will definitely go for quite some time. This is two things: it's a health event, and it's an economic event. And the health event, pleasingly, Australia is doing a very good job of managing. And we're seeing more discussion around easing of restrictions, which will occur at different stages around the country. And yes, there is a potential risk of other waves of reinfection into the future. But I think there's a good feeling that even if that would occur, I think governments actually seem to know their way around this at the moment. So I think there's a good amount of confidence to be had on the health side, which is not to say that this virus is going away anytime soon, because it's certainly not. It's with us for a long time. But from an economic point of view, this is an enormous and extremely rapid stress to the economy. Even when the economy is fully reopened, and actually won't be fully reopened for a long time, this is the world is also undergoing at least as big, and in fact sharper for those places which are not dealing with the health crisis well. So that the world has also been impacted very heavily, and that's this is a pretty serious recession that we're entering into.
Yeah. And the commercial office market there's a lot of businesses that might be looking to work from home a bit more than usual, and it's obviously a little bit hard to pinpoint exactly what it's going to be like post-COVID. But do you see any transformations in what the demand of the different, say, asset classes in property will be?
So, this is a very interesting question, isn't it? Because so much of take offices. Well, what are they? They're a crucible for people to come together and businesses to come together and be creative and do things and work in teams. So, how much of that changes at the other side of this? Well, I think there may well be some changes. The industry is looking at hot desking. Is hot desking the sort of thing which individuals will want to do and businesses will want to do, and maybe not. And that might actually drive a lower density of usage in office buildings. Then clearly we've all had this massive lesson in working from home and using all these fantastic apps which you learn more of. Find a new one every day. But I think at the end of the day, people are still social animals, and this this creativity that occurs can only occur when really people are with each other and working in teams. I think that doesn't change, I think. And I think while, people are prepared and happy to work through the environment that people are working through at the moment, they're hanging out to get back to work and to get back to working with each other. But they want to know that's safe, and that's a big thing that needs to occur first. Is it safe? And so again, that's something that the people in the industry are thinking, okay, well, as we slowly ease restrictions and companies start returning to work, how do we make sure that people are feeling safe and businesses are feeling safe with their people as well?
Mm-hmm. So far, the government response, a lot of it's been around the JobKeeper and just keeping people employed as much as they can, and perhaps not a hell of a lot of stimulus has gone out there to stimulate demand. Are you lobbying for any kind of stimulus in general, or am I wrong in saying that there hasn't been a hell of a lot so far?
No, I think you're quite right. I think the focus has been very much on dealing with the crisis as it emerged, the economic crisis as well as the health crisis, obviously, and it has been about dealing with that. Keeping people in jobs, dealing with issues in different sectors as they arise. But they are starting to turn their attention, governments at both the state and the federal level, as to how do we get the economy going again. And there's been more talk about the need to not just get things going in the same way they were, but we will need to find stronger drivers of economic growth. So we'll need to both get a recovery going, but also make sure that recovery is sustainable, and that really means a productivity agenda. And there are some tough nuts which as a country we've decided not to touch for quite some time now. Kicking the ball down the road a bit on some things like tax and industrial relations is being discussed. The need for continued investment in infrastructure, the need for some sort of demand stimulus to get the country going. Yeah, there definitely things on our agenda, and definitely things we're talking to government about.
Moving now toward the end of the podcast, what are you seeing over the horizon as longer term drivers in construction that's going to be influencing how we build going forward?
Well, you mentioned sustainability before, Adam, and that's very important. I think that's not going to go away with this crisis. So that will I'm a director of the Green Building Council, and it's something that I'm personally very committed to, and it's something that the industry, I think, in Australia can hold its head up very high on, in the great things that particularly leading firms do in this space. So that's not going to go away. I think there's a big, as we move out of this crisis, a big question around population, and that as a driver of growth and construction growth. We will be shrinking population. So how fast does our population sort of normalise again? How does it normalise, given that we'll be in an extended period, most likely, where the virus will still exist, and therefore there'll be travel restrictions in place. So that's a set of challenges for governments to solve. And look, what we've known about, one of the most powerful megatrends of the last 100 years, and it's been a megatrend that's been accelerating, and not just here in Australia but overseas as well, has been urbanisation. So, that as our economy evolves more into tertiary services sector economy, it's that proximity thing. There's a magic in proximity, and there's a people want to live closer to jobs, and that supports a sort of not just a denser city and set of urban environments, but also one that should factor livability into it very strongly. So I think there's some forces there which might be suspended right at the moment while we're dealing with this pandemic, but I don't think they go away either. So I think those continue to be a strong driver for the types of projects get built, and how projects integrate into their surrounding environments and communities.
Mm. Last year, the 2019 National Construction Code changes, by memory, had some changes to Section J, so the more energy efficiency from a sustainability point of view. Do
Yeah.
you think sustainability will inevitably be embedded within the construction code? Not just energy, but also I'm a structural engineer personally, so I've got a vested interest in materials. Do you think embodied carbon will also perhaps get in there in some way?
Well, one of the things we've actually been very successful on in an untrumpeted way with governments is around having a forward trajectory within our construction code so that we actually know where we're going in terms of some of these emissions-related issues. At the moment, as you know, we just sort of lurch from one change to another with the construction code. There's no pathway that we're on, and given the country and the globe is adopting 2050 targets and will progressively update those over time, it's sort of disconnected from that. So what we've been arguing is that much better to have a trajectory of known changes that roll out or can roll out over time. That means industry knows where we're going with these code changes, and they can position around a known set of changes that are happening in the future and say, yes, we want to be early adopters, or no, we'll wait till the code actually changes, or we know that in 2 years' time we need to adjust our material selections or our manufacturing or whatever it might be. So state and territory governments and the Commonwealth have actually all signed off on that trajectory. There's still more work to do about what that trajectory actually can look like, but in concept they've done that. So I think that's a good thing, something we've lobbied hard for, and I think it's a sensible thing which helps support the industry as it continues to evolve in this area.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Ken. Is there anything you would like to point anyone listening to in regards to what the Property Council's been up to and yourself?
Look, our website, propertycouncil.com.au, is a great resource, particularly at the moment. There's so many announcements of government going off almost every day. So we've got lots of great advice on those things and lots of great resources as well. So I'd point people towards that and say stay safe to all those people out there. It's we're going to remember to do that as some of these restrictions do unwind.